welcome. This is a little Mother's Day gentle yoga, a little restorative flavors to it. So if you have some of these kinds of pillows, little throw pillows that you would put on your couch or on your bed, those can be really useful. If you have some other yoga props like yoga bolsters, those are also useful. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to take one blanket and two little throw pillows, and I'm going to sort of build myself a little kind of reclining situation here. So I'm going to put a throw pillow and then a throw pillow down, and one I'm going to position a little bit up on the other so that I have a bit of a headrest that's a little bit higher, and I'll fix that when I get there. And then I'm just going to cover this whole kit and caboodle with a blanket. So what happens when you put the blanket over the little throw pillows is that they just have a little bit more sturdiness to them. Hang on, I've got to... I've got to remove the rubbery things that go with my singing bowls so that the small furry creature that I have who's obsessed with rubbery things, much to her own detriment, is no longer going to get at them. So we'll put those there. All right, now back to the class. So I've got one throw pillow, another throw pillow. I'm going to lay back over these. I'm also going to use a couple of little yoga blocks, or you could use a second blanket underneath the knees, okay? So once I have got that in place, you just lie down over this whole situation and then fix it. So I might want a little bit more under my head, so I can take my blanket and kind of tuck that underneath. I might just want to adjust this pillow a little higher. Now I'm up against this beanbag chair, so it gives me a little bit of structure. If you don't have anything like that and the pillow kind of falls out from underneath you, you can, or reorient yourself closer to a piece of furniture, or you can tuck the blanket under it so that it kind of goes up under the pillow, and that will help it stay put, okay? So then we're going to take the feet together and drop the knees open if that's comfortable. If that's not, you can do straight legs, right? So I'm going to try the butterfly, but I'm going to do it with the support of a couple blocks, right? So I put the blocks kind of up under the knee area so that my thigh bone is supported and my shin bone is supported and the knee is in the middle there. And then just pause. So it always takes me a few moments to sort of get everything exactly right. And then I can let myself stretch out and relax. So in this moment, what we're trying to do is kind of create a little bit of a nest or a sense of being nurtured and supported. So that is one of the roles that we often assign to mothers. In this case, we're letting ourselves be nurtured and doing the work. Regardless, sometimes, like relationships with the people who gave birth to us may be complicated or not. Relationships with people who have taken a mothering role in our lives can be complicated or not. The act of being a mother can be quite complicated. So letting all of those things kind of be present, right? Those are all true things. But also recognizing that we have a role in our own mothering, of creating circumstances for ourselves that allow for us to be nurtured. And so allowing the pose and the moment to do that for you. Now once you've got yourself settled into the shape, the pose, then let yourself come home to the breath and just pay attention. The ability to take a deep breath has become even more precious. always was, but it's become more poignant as of recent times anyway. We've staged to the point where, like, generally for me, there's a point about a couple of minutes in where my nervous system really gets the message to relax, right? And so we're right at that kind of space, at least in my world. So it might be true for you as well. So if you're finally kind of feeling yourself letting go, like, give yourself permission to do that little extra deep, long sigh. Or a little lengthening to the exhale. Just kind of linger over the exhale a little. And do that a few more times just to allow yourself to sort of really shift into this softer place. Now, if something in your body is nagging at you, like your hip joint or your back or something like that, make those changes first. Then do the same practice. Right? Pay attention to the breath. And as you feel yourself sinking in and relaxing a little deeper, deepen those exhales along with it, whether it's a sigh or just allowing the exhale to kind of linger out. Try to let our nervous system really shift gears for just a couple more minutes. Sometimes we kind of drift off, or our thoughts kind of take us on a journey. We're going to stay for about another minute. Just, again, just draw yourself gently back to the breath. And gently back to just your experience right here in the pose in the moment. So if your mind was off kind of making lists or doing other things, just come on back to the moment. And if you were already there, cool, stay. Feel yourself being gently supported by the earth, represented, of course, by the floor or whatever is under you. Notice the kind of, at the very tippy top of the inhale and the kind of end of the exhale, just notice the difference in quality. What is the quality, what is the experience of the tippy top of that inhale versus the experience at the bottom of the exhale? Now we can assign sort of different adjectives or descriptors to those experiences. And those, you know, if we compared them, they might not be the same. So the important part is just this experience of the breath being with you, right? And this kind of fullness that happens with the inhale and the sort of release or emptiness that happens with the exhale, and just noticing how those qualities of the breath, or those two different halves of the breath, sort of impact your overall experience, all right, of being alive. So we're going to bring the knees together if they're apart. I'm going to take my blocks out of the way just so they're not hampering me. And then we're going to allow, like if you had your legs out straight, you can go ahead and allow yourself to put your feet on the floor, and then just widen your knees out just enough to get a little movement going there. Now, if I do with my feet like in bridge position, that is cool. I like the way that feels. It's definitely its own experience compared to if I take my feet out really wide, right? Where the knee is allowed to drop in quite deep, right? So that's just a different experience. And so you just kind of find your experience of these little windshield wiper legs. And then we're going to take the stuff that's underneath us out from under us. So taking out the pillows and whatever else might be under you. And I'm just going to set these things off to the side. I may come back to them later. But right now I want to just see what happened and if there's a change. So when I lay down on my back, is there a feeling of like those pillows still being underneath me? Is there a sense of things kind of returning, right? Because my shoulders were able to open up around those blankets, and now my shoulders are back in their normal relationship with my ribs and my spine. And so how is that experience? And so bring the knees in towards you, and you can pause for a moment where the sacrum is on the floor and the weight of the knees is over the sacrum, and that's right at the back of your pelvis in the event that that is a new word for you. And then we're going back and forth. I've gotten really accustomed to using the names of bones, but there was a time when I didn't know those names. So in any case, we're going to take the legs now over to one side. So just for a moment, just kind of go halfway to each and see if there's a side that's more inviting. I think mine is the left today. So I'm going to take my legs over to the left. Now, what I'm going to do with one of these little throw pillows is I'm going to put that underneath my leg so that when it falls onto the floor, it's got that soft cushion, so I can take my other leg and wrap it over it. Okay, so that gives me a little bit of a kind of just a little bit of a relationship between my two leg bones that allows this area right here around my outer hip to get a little bit more stretch, or a little bit more pressure. Now, I find that pleasant. So if you do not find that pleasant, then don't do that part. And then extend your arms if you can out so that the shoulders can relax into the floor. You may have to do a little bit of adjustment to get yourself all laid out. And then we're feeling this kind of stretch right here through the chest, maybe, I am. And I can turn my head towards my legs, or I can turn my head towards the arm with the stretch. And you can leave your head in the middle too, that's a third option. But see what happens when you make those choices. Which one do you like better today? Now again, every time I do a yoga pose, there's a point where my body sort of picks itself up a little bit, my nervous system engages to sort of make sure I'm going to be okay, and then within a few breaths of the pose happening, I feel the sense of relaxation starting to happen. And so I'm getting to that stage right now of my body letting go a little bit because I've made all the little adjustments. And so once you're in a place that feels relatively stable, see if you can let go a little bit. This is an inner kind of letting go, right? It's a nervous system, trusting the pose, kind of letting go. Now, if there's reason not to trust the pose, you might add some more props, some more blankets or pillows or other things. Because one of the key components of letting go is that you can trust it. You can trust. And so that is a multi-layered experience. Now we're going to take another deep breath here. And I'm just kind of gently pressing my shoulder into the floor. I'm using this little piece of furniture to help me out with that. And then I'm bringing my top leg back and my bottom leg back. And then giving myself this little moment here to just stretch out and feel what happened. So I hung out with that long enough to create something, right? So this leg, the one that was on top, feels a little longer to me. It's not. If I sat down and measured them, it probably wouldn't be longer. But it feels longer. And it feels, this side of my body feels a little bit different than the other side. There's a kind of lighter feeling to it. I find that kind of interesting. So I'm inclined to do the other side very similarly because I didn't have any experience that felt uncomfortable, right? But if I have an experience that feels uncomfortable, like, oh, that's a little sore, then when I do it again, I try to use that as an opportunity to learn from my practice, right? So when I bring my, so this is how I started putting a pillow under my leg, right? So I can wrap my legs around each other without putting the pillow under it. But the intensity that I experience is sometimes too much intensity. So it then feels sore or painful. So if I put the pillow there, now the pain part goes away, but the yummy part stays. And if, so that's the deal. And you learn, right? Nobody told me to do that. It's just learning from it. So you're looking for, if there is any sensation at all, and some people are so mobile in their bodies that they don't feel a lot of things. That's okay. So you concentrate on the subtler sensations of the breath. How, when you get to that fullness of the full inhale, how does that impact the sensation in your body versus the end, right? So all the subtle sensations are there. Even if we're not feeling a lot of stretchy sensation, all of those really beautiful subtle sensations of breath are still present. And then ultimately what we're trying to do with any yoga practice is we're trying to get better at discernment, right? In Sanskrit it's called viveka, and I might be pronouncing that wrong incidentally, but it's this quality of really careful attention, careful being able to really look at the details of things. Now, ultimately we're trying to discern when an impulse is coming from our ego or from our the kind of portion of our mind that makes us feel like I'm the most important creature on the planet Earth, or whether an impulse is coming from our kind of higher consciousness that connects everything and everyone, right? That part of us that's part of everything. That's the real discernment. It's like, is this impulse I have coming from the greater good, or is it coming from my own selfish needs? That ultimately is what we're after. But in this case, what we're doing is we're practicing this quality of paying attention. Like, where do I feel that in my body, right? Because that always gives it away. One of the things that fascinates me about the way that we often think about things is we have this word or this phrase called gut instinct, right? Our gut instinct, I've got a gut instinct. Well, your gut instinct is coming from the part of you that is purely about personal, purely about the me, right? That gut instinct is not about we. And so when you have gut instincts, they're the best thing for you personally, but that may not be in the best interest of the collective we, right? Everyone. So these are just little things that start to kind of fascinate me about our own experience and where we feel things. Like, literally you feel things in your gut, right? But recognizing that those impulses, and not to say that they're wrong, because sometimes they're exactly right. There have been times where I've had a gut instinct to get myself out of danger and have done so and been very grateful because nothing happened to me, right? And then other times where I ignored those instincts and wished that I hadn't. And so there are times where those are really valuable, but there are also times where we need to recognize where the impulse is coming from and then really decide if that's the appropriate thing. Okay, so we got 2 more breaths here. I've been chatting you guys up a lot, so. Now we're going to take this top leg, right? So big breath. And then we're going to take this top leg, and I don't have anything to push against on this side, so I'm just going to push my shoulder into the floor a little bit, and then I'm going to bring that leg back away, right? So, once you get to the middle, again, give yourself a little moment to rinse. I'm rinsing out my shoulder, and I'm rinsing out my hip. And then stretch back out for a moment and just feel where that landed you. And, so for me, the experience, again, is quite pleasant. Again, I learned to add support to my world, right? Which is a whole other metaphor. We'll go down that road another day. But so this is, again, coming back to this kind of mothering ourselves, right? So I have learned from my practice that a little bit of extra support is helpful, so that when I come out of the pose, it's a pleasant experience. Now, if you've come out of your pose and it wasn't that pleasant, learn from that. It's, part of mothering ourselves is also that part of motherhood where we have to kick ourselves in our own pants from time to time to get out there and get things done. So in this case, getting things done is learning from our practice. All right. So we're going to come to a seated position, but we're going to do it nice and slow. So you're going to roll to your side, and we're going to pause for a moment. And then, because we've been laying down here a while, so now you can come up when you're ready. Now, for some of us, sitting on the floor is not a comfortable thing. So this is where the pillows can come in handy again. So you can sit up on the edge of a pillow, or you can sit up on the edge of a blanket. And for me, I'm going to use this blanket in a different way, and I already know I want to use it this way, and that is to take it out into a fairly good sized rectangle and then roll it up so that I've got a nice long blanket tube like that, because that's going to go under my knees in a moment. But for now, I'm going to get my sit bones out from under me. I'm going to loosen my legs up to a point where it's comfortable for them to be crossed. You can also take your legs out straight, or you can do a bent knee like that, because all of this will work. And you can come back to this butterfly shape if that is helpful. So we're going to move the torso back and forth. So I'm going to take my breastbone up and try to bring the front of my pelvis forward. So that's the shape that's like a cobra, or some the cow shape when you're kneeling. And then we're going to go backwards, hug the navel in, and let the breastbone and the navel get closer together and rock the pelvis backwards, okay? So the pelvis is moving forward, and I'm kind of moving my spine. and the pelvis is moving backwards, and I'm rounding through my back. All right, so it's a minimal amount of movement, perhaps. Some people are more mobile than others, but it feels nice to do those two shapes. Okay. Now, so now I'm going to start to do kind of a roll. So I'm going to come forward, breastbone is up, pelvis is forward, and then I'm going to take my rib cage over to one side, round it around the back, go over to the other side as far as I can swing it, and then I'll wind up back in the front, breastbone up, pelvis forward, okay? Over to the side, wrap it around the back, over to the side and forward. One of the yoga teachers that I like online calls these Sufi rolls. I don't know. I like the idea, although it does make me think of sushi rolls. So that's problematic. But in any case, now we're going to get to the front. We're going to go the other direction. So go the other way with your spin. Oh. We're going to do it one more time in this direction. Okay. Now when you get all the way to the front, you're just going to pause, and then we'll bring ourselves up. Okay. So we've got these kind of rolling rib cage things happening. So now we're going to take the legs into a V shape. And this is where I put the blanket underneath my knees. So for me, going out into a V is a little bit tricky because the back of my knee likes to hyperextend. And then it doesn't hurt me in the moment, but later my knee feels uncomfortable. So I've learned to put the blanket underneath my knee. Again, nurturing myself here by using a prop. Now one leg is going to be straight and one leg is going to be bent, but we're going to try to kind of keep the thighs going in this V shape. So you just pick a leg that you want to bend, and you're going to bring that guy in, okay? Now, we're going to take this shape through 3 different iterations of stretch. So we're going to go over the bent knee side first. So you're going to turn towards that bent knee and fold over it. And then this is where some other props can come in handy. So if you can't, it's like some people can rest their elbows right on the floor. I am not one of them. So I grab a couple blocks or a couple cushions, put my elbows on, right? You don't have to rest your elbows on the floor, it's just more comfy. And then what I'm going to play with is I'm going to play with leaning into this shape. And when I lean in, this sit bone on the other side comes up off the floor, right? And so if I then push that sit bone down toward the floor, engage all the muscles in this leg, turn my toes up, then something else happens. And I feel different sensations in my glutes, in my thigh, and in the muscles around my hip, okay? So I can get loose again, all the muscle contraction gone, leaning forward with gravity, and then holding that kind of lean with the torso, reactivate the leg, drawing my thigh out, my hip toward the ground. It's not totally touching, but it's working in that direction. And then I'm going to, one more time, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to hold it just for a couple breaths. So then I'm going to re-engage my long leg, drawing the hip toward the floor. Spreading out my toes a little bit. Slight bend in my knee. And then I'm going to inhale my way back up. Alright, so that's how I approach this pose. Now there are lots of ways to approach any yoga pose. You just approach it the way you want. But this is the fun part for me, is when I'm done, what do I feel? So this leg that was doing all of that engagement definitely feels different than the leg that was mostly passive in this shape, okay? So there's this kind of difference in sensation. And my back feels like one side's a little different than the other, right? Because I was doing a side stretch. All right, so now we're going to go straight down the center. And again, if you can touch the floor, great. And if you can't, you can build things up until you can touch those things. And now there's a little bit different sensation for me. So I'm kind of rocking back and forth, just kind of experimenting. So there's a lot more spiciness kind of going into the inner thighs here for me. My low back feels different in this shape. So now I have a couple of options. So one of the options is to change my spine. So I could inhale and draw my breastbone up towards the ceiling, away from the belly button, lengthening out, and then exhale and let my back go rounder. So I could do that pulsation. And this becomes a lot about my back. Now, if that's not a comfortable thing, I can choose one of those options and just hold it. So we're going to do 2 more breaths. And then you're going to inhale your way up. And then pause for a moment at the top of that and see how that landed you. And because I did all that work with my back, I've got a lot more sensation in my back now, a lot less sensation in my hips and legs, although they were still in the same shape, right? It's possible too that I'm just getting, because our mind will sort of fuzz into the background things that we, that are, you don't smell smells anymore after a while, and you don't hear sounds sometimes after a while, because those things we become habituated to it. How's that? Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to side bend out over this long leg. Now you can do this in a pure side bend. Rotate your torso towards the bent knee and then side stretch over that leg. Whether you put the arm over your head or not, you could even wrap the arm behind your back. Or you can turn towards that leg, the long leg, and stretch over it, and that's still a side stretch. It's just a little different side stretch, right? So you can choose the one that seems like the best one for you today. Now, my elbow will rest on my thigh, and then it lets me kind of provide a little support for my head if I want it. I could also grab this toe or put my arm on the inside of the leg, but you might find like maybe your elbow goes all the way to the floor here or something along that line. Now I can let myself sort of give into this stretch, or I could also activate through my hip and kind of draw the hip down. Now that increases the amount of stretch I'm experiencing in my low back. So kindness is a good idea here. Low backs can be sensitive. Kindness is probably always a good idea, let's just face it. All right, so I'm gonna take my top arm up and I'm gonna reach back behind me with it and use that to help me get out of the shape. And then I'm gonna undo my legs. And then pause for a moment and just feel where that pose landed me. The sensation on this side of my head is very different than the sensation on this side. I'm noticing the change in my neck, in the shoulder. So a little asymmetric. But we're going to fix it in a second, so we're going to be all right. All right, if you like, you can bend your knees, give yourself a little windshield wipery moves with the legs. And then we'll straighten them back out into the V shape, and then the opposite knee is going to be our bent knee, okay? And again, just adjust any props that you need so that you've got the props that will give you the best possible support. Okay. So I'm turning towards the bent knee. This is the first in the 3 shapes that we're doing here. And so folding over this bent knee, and again, I might want to use some props or some pillows or something to kind of provide some structure. Again, if I just let myself go wholeheartedly into this, my hip comes way up off the floor, and that is fine, like it's supposed to. That's the way the pose is. But if I were to then play with that, right, try stretching that hip back down toward the floor, and then letting it get relaxed, and then activating through the hip and the leg and bringing it back down, those kinds of things make it a little more interesting, right? A little more of an exploration, which is really what I want yoga poses to be in general. It's an opportunity to explore the details. All right, so I am gonna do one more little series where I'm really engaged. And my toes are spreading out, and I've got my know, my knee and my toe on my long leg pointing up as close as I can get it to straight up toward the ceiling. As I stretch down through my hip. And I'm going to inhale my way up. And then just take a moment to appreciate the change or the difference or the way that little shape left me feeling. And then we're going to go down the center. And so again, whether the props that you've got are useful. Just breathing. I like to appreciate too, for the first little bit, just the differences that I'm experiencing in each shape. Like the kind of spiciness down my inner thigh on this one is really fun. And then I might go back to this kind of sense that I had of lengthening through my back. And last time I did it as a pulse, but this time I'm going to do a couple breaths in each. I'm just kind of holding that. And again, so I'm just kind of learning from my practice. You can be very symmetric and do the same thing. And then I'm going to make myself go into a slightly rounder version of the spine and do a couple breaths there. Now we're going to take one more breath with this shape. And then come all the way up. And pause for a moment, and again, just notice, like, was the pose nurturing you? Was it providing you with some kind of nice release or ease in your body? Or was it quite the opposite? So, it is what it is. But we learn. All right, so then this last pose is the side stretch. Again, you can forward bend over the long leg, or you can turn your torso so that it faces more towards that bent knee and then side bend over, with or without an arm over your ear. And once you're in here, explore your pose. You might need some head support, so you put your hand under there. Or you might need to back off of your low back a little bit. So you go back a notch, right? So you're just feeling out what's true. Being mindful of places that you've injured in the past, because those can be intriguing. Take my arm out of the situation now and take 2 more breaths. So reaching out with that arm that I took back, I'm going to take myself out of that shape. And that's our last moment with that shape. So again, take a few moments to just notice how it landed us. Do we feel that asymmetry that we experienced last time? How long does that last? And then you can give yourself some little windshield wipery legs. All right, here's the fun part. We're gonna wind up laying on our belly. We're gonna get there in a second, but you know, after a little bit of movement and things kind of releasing out, we're gonna start with what is called a crocodile. Now, if when you lay on your belly, if you're on a hard floor surface, and your mat is not that thick, you might want to put a blanket down just over the floor surface so that the bony parts of your pelvis or bony parts of your ribs aren't laying on a hard surface. Now I've got a carpeted surface and so I'm pretty good. So I'm going to just set my blanket off to the side. And then when you're ready, we're going to come onto the belly. Now we're going to start with the crocodile. So the crocodile is pretty much just laying on your belly. So once you're down here, you're gonna just stack your arms up and rest either your forehead or your chin on your crossed arms, and then let everything else relax. Now you can do some little windshield wipery moves with the legs. Oh. And then we're going to try to just let the hip flexor relax for a moment. We're going to do some other stuff too, but for now we're going to try to just let it go. And just release into the shape. Now, if I bring my elbows in tighter, I get a little bit more of a tricep and a shoulder release here. So if that's of interest to you, you can try bringing your arms in a little bit more. I rest my hand up on my shoulder. Oh. And again, because all of our bones are shaped a little differently, you may find the elbows out wider is more intense for you. So you can experiment and choose the right amount. Now, if you have any knee trouble, you might want to have a strap. If you don't have a strap, you can use your blanket or towel or anything you may have handy that will allow you to hold onto your foot with a little bit of forgiveness, okay? So what I am going to do with my strap is I'm going to make a loop in it. So I'm going to put the buckle through, or put the strap through the buckle. Now, if you don't have a loop, you can tie a knot in your blanket or towel, and just, you know, so that you have a little loop of that, or you can just wrap it around and hold on to it. It'll work out no matter what. It'll work. Okay, this just gives me a little extra option. So I've created a little loop in my strap, and I'm going to do my right leg first. So I'm going to take my strap and I'm going to loop it around my foot. So I've rolled onto my back, and now I'm rolling back onto my belly, and I'm going to keep my strap in that loop. I have put the strap over my shoulder, and I've propped myself up into a sphinx, okay? So that's where we're going next. So we're gonna prop up into a sphinx. You can go back to the crocodile once you've got hold, but for some of you, you'll be able to just reach back there and grab that foot. For me, because my knee is a little bit sensitive, it's a little bit better if I have the strap over my shoulder, and I can just hold onto the strap in my sphinx pose, and then push my leg into the strap and try to pick my thigh up off the floor. So that's what we're up to. So we got a half of it's a version of a frog. It's just not the yin version. it's the Ashtanga version, where you reach back and grab your feet. And what you might do if you can hold onto your foot easily is pull your foot down towards your hip, and then try to lift your thigh up off the floor. And again, if you've got sensitive knees, use a strap so you can keep your knee a little bit bigger, and just try to get that thigh to come up off the floor. Now, don't lift your hip, so you could do it this way to lift your thigh up off the floor, but that's your whole hip. We're trying to stretch out that hip flexor. So keep your hip on the ground, but see if you can get your thigh to come off the ground without your hip lifting. It's not easy, and it doesn't have to be big, right? My thigh is barely lifted off the floor, but I feel it. That's what matters. Okay. So we're going to hang out with this a little bit longer. About 30 more seconds. Don't forget to breathe, yogis. This is one of those stretches that it's where you're mothering yourself because it's good for you. It's like eat your broccoli stretches. All right, take a big breath. And then we're going to gently release. Hopefully this worked out. Okay, so if we gave our knee the right amount of space, whether that was with a strap or not, we should, when we let go, okay, should is a weird word, but probably when we let go, it'll be all right. And this whole feeling of this thigh and hip will be a little softer than on the other side. So just compare, right? So quads and hip flexors are tricky because they intersect with our knee. So I'm going to do the other side. So I'm rolling over onto my side so that I can switch feet with the strap. I'm going to try to do it hands-free. Oh, yeah. Okay, so then I'm rolling back onto my belly, and I'm coming to the Sphinx, and now I've got my other leg in the strap. So you might be doing this by holding onto your foot, and that's fine too. So I pull the strap until I'm like, my knee says, yep, that's good. No more, please. And then I push the foot into the strap and try to lift my thigh without lifting my hip, okay? Doesn't take much. You don't have to do much quite often, especially those of us who might have tight hip flexors. It won't take much to feel that sensation of stretch on the top of your thigh and the front of your hip. And if your knee is taking more of the post, let go with the knee a little bit and try to just lift the thigh, okay? So give your knee all the room it needs to be held in an appropriate way. Because it's worth the stretch in the hip flexor and the quad. And get this little back bend from doing the Sphinx as well. So we're going to hang out for about 45 more seconds, yogis. We're almost there. Or I should say we're halfway there. Halfway there. Now we're almost there. As my thigh kind of lets go, gives me a little bit more room. And usually for me, it takes to that kind of point. About 30 seconds, about a minute or so into the stretch, things start to change, which is why I like to hold them for a little bit longer. All right, we got 2 more big breaths, y'all. So then we're going to let the thigh come down, slowly release the foot, and let the whole leg get straightened out, and then take yourself out of your back bend, back to your little crocodile, and just rinse everything out. See how it went? Oh. Whew. That's kind of nice, y'all. Now I'm going to leave this left leg in this strap for now. I'm going to move it, but I'm going to leave it where it is. You might decide that you need a strap. You might decide that you don't need a strap. So we're going to roll onto our side. So I'm laying on my right side, and I have the strap around my left foot for now. Now I can use my right arm as a pillow, or I can put my right arm up in front of me and put a pillow under my head as a pillow. So this is up to you how you want to do this, all right? My arm makes a pretty good pillow, so I'm going to go with that. Now, we're going to take this left leg straight up in the air. And this is the sleeping Buddha, or sometimes this pose is also called, I can't remember exactly how to pronounce it in Sanskrit, but the translation is Vishnu's snake couch. So, if you're not familiar with Vishnu, he has a couch made out of a giant snake with multiple heads, and apparently he likes to chill and dream there from time to time. But in any case, so what happens when I do this sometimes is my left hip will fall backwards. So what I want to try to do, this is a little bit of core work. So we're going to try to hold the hips as close to level on top of each other. Draw in through the sides of the waist to help hold yourself there. And then you're just drawing that leg up until you feel something interesting. And it might be that the interesting part is you just maintaining your balance. So you can bend this bottom knee and swing it forward, and that's going to give you a bigger state of balance. If you lengthen that leg out, it'll make it a little bit harder. You have to use more of your core. And who doesn't want to use more of their core, I say? Again, sometimes mom made you eat your peas. That's what these poses are for. To make you do things that are good for you. Now, of course, if you're tearing your hamstrings or something like that, please stop. Back off of that part of the pose. Just do the core work part. So we're going to hang out here for about another, it's like 35 more seconds, y'all. We're going to hang out for just a bit longer. Sometimes I like to get a little sassy and take the bottom leg all the way off the floor and see if I can just hold it with my core. It's fun. Oh. It's almost like a boat pose, but not quite. For those of you that love the boat pose. All right, so we got one more big breath. Now we're going to keep the strap on the foot, but just let go of it for a second, or just let go of it a little bit, so that what we're going to do is roll onto our back. And now it's going to become a hamstring stretch almost entirely. And like for me, the Vishnu's couch version is a little bit on the inner thigh, a lot of core, a little inner thigh. This is all about my hamstrings, right? So as you bring the leg in toward you, stretch the other leg out. You can put a pillow under your head if you want. I like to put the pillow under the long leg that I'm resting on the ground, and let that kind of be the place where the pose lands. Oh. Now you can bend the knee a little bit, you can straighten the leg a little bit, you can turn the foot. It's not really the foot, but the whole leg. So just like pivot from the thigh bone so the foot turns out, or even in. Sometimes that's more comfortable for me. So you're just sort of exploring the possibilities here of where all the sensations could go. I like to pull my toes down and get a little more into my calf muscles. I'm going to stay for about 30 more seconds. Okay, so we're going to take a nice big breath. Now, before we go too far, bend your knee a little bit, take the pressure away, and then take your right foot and put it up in your strap if you're using a strap, okay? Because we're going to go right into Vishnu's couch pose. So you don't have to straighten that leg all the way out, but take that bottom leg and just give it a little rinse. Oh, a little windshield wiper. And then I've got to gently give myself a little bit more space, but you're going to roll right onto your left side with that left leg up in the air. Or right leg rather, up in the air. And then try to get yourself balanced so that you don't fall backwards, but instead find that sort of core connection. Right on. So as best we can, we're going to try to stay balanced right on the side of the hip. And again, you can do the little extra bit of work by lifting your thigh, but you don't have to. So we're here. Maybe there's an inner thigh stretch. Maybe it's mostly about you being wobbly and trying to hold it steady. And that's okay too. Again, you could like take that bottom leg and lift it. If you're feeling pretty core supported, that makes the whole thing fall apart. By all means, put that leg back down. You need the extra support. But if you can kind of maintain it, like drawing in through the sides of the waist, connects you to your transverse abdominis muscles, which are the deepest ab muscles, the ones that really support the spine. So that is a kind of a fun way to play with the shape. Sometimes you'll lose it, and sometimes you'll gain it. So we're going to stay for about 4 more breaths. And then just kind of letting the knee bend a notch so that you can roll onto your back. And then we're going to be in this hamstring stretch. Again, you could do what I like to do and put a little pillow underneath the leg that's just resting on the floor now. Because I was doing a lot of work with that leg. Trying to maintain that core balance. Again, so we're kind of letting yourself play with this hamstring stretch a little. Kind of finding out, oh, should I bend the knee a little bit more or less? I want more calf muscle or less. Stay for about more seconds. Just noticing all the little details of your pose. And last 2 breaths in it. So you're going to bend your knee, slip the strap off. Oh, you can put that foot down on the ground. And we're going to give ourselves those little windshield wipery legs, or you could just straighten out your legs. Just take, I like to do both, little windshield wipers. And then kind of all the way out to straight. And then just pause again and notice. Notice whether that was good medicine or not such good medicine. Now, yogis, we're going to do a little bit of work with an inversion. And the inversion can be just as simple as you lay on your back and you put your feet in the air. Okay? It can be that simple. If you happen to have an empty wall and you can put your butt up against that wall, put your legs straight up the wall, you can do legs up the wall. If you've got a piece of furniture, like I've got this beanbag chair here, or if you have your couch, or if you have a chair, you can bring the yourself to it, or in the case of a chair, you can bring it to you and put it so that you can rest your legs up on the seat of the chair, okay? Or up on the seat of the couch. So I'm going to do that with this beanbag chair. Now, another possibility exists, and that is that you can do a supported bridge pose. Now, pillows are a little squishy, but they work. And to do the supported bridge pose, or you can use a block, right? So you can use that. But you take your hips up into bridge, so you got to get yourself up first, and then slip whatever it is underneath you, the pillow or the block, so that it supports your pelvis and your sacrum. And then just make sure that your head and neck are not in trouble. Sometimes you need a blanket under your shoulders, right? So rather than put the blanket under your head, which will bend your chin in more towards you, you want to try to keep a neutral curve under your neck. So a blanket underneath the whole shoulder girdle might be the thing for that. And then you could just stay here, feet on the floor, or stretch the legs out straight. Or you could do my favorite pose, which is that supported, with the block anyway, it's a supported shoulder stand. Now the block is quite firm, so the pillow will be a little squishier, but you bring the feet right up, and so the hips are higher than the heart, and the legs are up, and this is an inversion, it's a full inversion. And you just want to make sure that there's not undue pressure on your neck. And if you have any pressure on the back of your eye that you perceive, you might come down out of this pose. There are some conditions in the back of the eye, retinopathy, or detached retina, glaucoma, things like that, that can be problematic when there's extra pressure applied. So if any of that is true for you, keep your feet on the ground, okay? Or even keep your hips on the ground. This is kind of feeling fun, so I'm going to stay with this supported shoulder stand, and I'll turn it into a supported bridge from time to time. We're just going to get ourselves upside down a little bit, just even if it's just the legs up, for so many reasons. To let the lymph kind of drain, to get our heart rate down a little bit maybe. Sometimes the, because the blood flow coming back to the heart is a little easier when we're not working against gravity. Which is, might be nice. Most of the time I don't hang out upside down, although I would like to hang out upside down from time to time. So it's nice to occasionally get the legs up. Most of my day is not spent upside down. I'm not a bat. Although, maybe in another life. I like to do these little shaky shakes with the legs just to kind of keep or aid that lymphatic fluid in moving. Now some inversions are easier on the body than others, and so some you'll want to come down from sooner. So I'm going to take my legs down, but I'm going to leave my hips up. So I just do this nice and slow, one leg at a time. If I stretch one leg out, I get a really deep
kind of stretch across the hip flexor. So 2 is a little spicy for me, but 1 feels pretty good. Downside to the blocks is that sometimes they're a little pokey on the edges. They're nice and firm, but they're a little on the pokey side. Okay, yogis, so we're going to stay for about another minute or so if you're up for it. If you're not, you come down. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting about inversions, and this was a series of studies done in India. So they started with a study, and then they did some peer reviews. They did larger sample sizes of people, and found pretty consistent results, which is that the stress hormone levels in our bloodstream seem to be impacted by inversions. Now, they did all kinds of inversions, headstands, handstands, simple inversions like these. They all worked. The ones that were the most relaxing seem to have the biggest benefit, but that makes sense just in general, right? So in general, if you're more relaxed, there's less stress hormone going on. So these kinds of inversions that we're looking at right now, and I'm coming, I've got my feet on the ground, and in a moment I'm going to lift my hips up and I'm going to slip this block out. Now you might be ready to come, if you're up the wall or up on a chair, just bring your knees into your chest for a moment, okay? So we're just kind of priming ourselves to come out of here. And then once I've got the block out, I'm going to give myself a little massage right where that block was. Oh. Okay, so then you guys who are doing your up the wall pose, you can bend your knees. So these really simple inversions can have some really major benefits. Is the point I was trying to get at. It doesn't have to be a full headstand for you to be able to benefit from a shape. Okay, so yogis, we're going to set ourselves up for some Shavasana. And then while you're hanging out in Shavasana, I'm going to play some singing bowls for you. Now, to get yourself set up for Shavasana, you're going to want some goodies, okay? So I'm going to describe a few options, and then I'm going to tell you why I'm doing them. So the pillows are really nice under the legs. And you can use a rolled up blanket here, but so either way, but if you're using pillows and it's not wide enough pillow for both legs, use one pillow under each, okay? And what I do is I pull the pillow really close up to the edge of my hip, like right up against the butt cheek. You know, that little divot in the bottom of your butt cheek, pull it right up into there. And then stretch your legs out and feel, okay? So for me, often that's the right spot. Just right up in there, gives my hip a chance to release right here. And this is what we're looking at, is this hip flexor softening, right? We've done all kinds of stretches to try to get to these different areas on our hips and our legs. And so just giving that little softening there is really important. And you might need like a little relaxing kind of back massage or something like that first. But then you're going to get your legs positioned. Now for some people, it's more comfortable if the pillow is down under the knee instead. So you're going to experiment with that. So that's the first part. The second part is in supporting your head. And here's the thing that's interesting to me. And I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I'm going to tell you about it so that you can start to pay attention to it, okay? There is these two little bony ridges on the back of your skull. If you feel back with your hands, you can feel these two little ridges that go up, you know, where your neck bones come in to meet your skull, and then down the edge, right towards your ear. So there's these two little bony ridges. These are called occipital ridges, okay? So those two little bony ridges, there is some nerve endings and musculature back there that when this area is tight, right, it can seem to, and this is something that I've read the science journals and I don't know how to articulate it completely, but here's what is interesting, is if this area is tight, it seems to make it harder for us to connect with each other and to connect to our sort of sense of well-being, or a sense of being supported by the world, supported by the universe, connected to God, however you want to think about it, okay? So if we can create a soft support in this area and relax this muscle, the muscles around the neck, it seems to help us connect more deeply to our spiritual practice, all right, in addition to each other. So you could do a little blanket, right? Now the thing with the blanket is that you want to provide a gentle amount of support right in that area. So put the blanket under your head so that it's nice and smooth and there's not any lumpiness, and then you can make just the tiniest little curl of blanket to support those two little ridges right on the back of your skull. And you might have to play with that a little bit. But that little bit of extra support, and this is magical to me, seems, and I've always liked it, but now I have some science to back it up, it seems to let my body relax more deeply, right? And just that little bit of support in that one specific spot seems to allow the nervous system to more completely shift into that really soft parasympathetic state. Now you don't necessarily want that support to be really huge, nor should it force your head forward. So make sure that it is the most super duper lightest little support right under those bones. Just a kiss, a whisper of support right there, okay? So then get yourselves all settled in. So now that I've explained how or why to do it that way, now yogis, take a nice deep breath. And let go with the big ah. And just let yourselves surrender into the shape. so gently. Allow yourself to just notice the breath again. Take a couple of breaths deeper so that you can feel them down toward your toes. And then take a breath so deep you can get it all the way to the very edges. Let it go with a sigh. And then start to wiggle and stretch through your fingers and toes. And then take a moment just to appreciate all of the people in your life who have in some way mothered you. Whether your own mother, or friends, or other relatives, or people who've mentored you at work. Like all of the people who provided that sort of guidance and nourishment and nurturing that mothers provide. Just send a little thank you from your heart out to all those people who've made your way possible, right? Made it possible for you to have this life that you lead. And then when you're ready, you can stretch in all directions and bring yourself to a seated position when you're ready to do that. So thanks to you, all of you who mother something, whether it's a plant or a critter or a human, on some point in your life. Thank you for doing those roles. And let's take a big old breath together. Nice big inhale. And a big deep sigh. And enjoy the rest of your day. Namaste, mommies.